It was the kind of suburb where every blade of grass looked like it had a stylist, where morning joggers waved politely and porch lights blinked off one by one as the sun crested over identically tan rooftops. The air was still, with that eerie quiet you only get in overly managed neighborhoods, like the silence is enforced. And maybe, in a way, it was. I bought the house 5 years ago mostly for the peace and quiet. It was a nice enough area, close to work, decent schools, the kind of place where nothing much ever happened. And I liked it that way. I'm not flashy. I keep my lawn trimmed, pay my dues on time, and avoid drama like the plague. I'm not the type to poke the bear, especially when that bear wears oversized sunglasses and chairs every HOA meeting like it's a corporate boardroom. Karen, that's not just what we called her, it was her actual name. Karen Mitchell, president of the Evergreen Lakes Homeowners Association. Picture the stereotype: bleach blonde helmet hair, pastel sweater sets, and a clipboard that may as well have been surgically attached to her arm. She had rules for everything. No holiday lights before December 1st. No garbage cans visible for more than 30 minutes. No vehicles in the driveway unless pre-approved and registered. Yes, registered. Like we were tagging, migrating wildlife. But for the most part, I managed to fly under her radar. I followed the rules, or at least enough of them to avoid attention. I'd heard the stories: neighbors fined for lawn decor, others written up for unauthorized potted plants. But I figured if I just kept my head down, I'd be fine. Then my niece came to visit. Her name, Emily. 17, smart, sarcastic in the best way, and just trying to enjoy a few quiet weeks before the chaos of senior year. Her mom, my sister, had to travel for work, so I offered to let her stay with me. No big deal. Emily showed up in her old Honda Civic, nothing fancy, just clean and dependable, and parked it right in my driveway. I didn't think twice. I remember that evening clearly. We grilled burgers, watched a dumb comedy on Netflix, and laughed until our sides hurt. Emily told me about school, her plans to study environmental science, and how much she needed a break from everything. I was just glad to have her around. The house always felt a little too quiet when it was just me. The next morning, I got up early and stood by the window with my coffee. The sun was barely up, casting golden light across the cul-de-sac. Everything looked just the same as always, serene, controlled, and boring in a comforting way. Emily was still asleep. The Civic sat quietly in the driveway, catching the light. I remember thinking, this is nice. This is how things should be. Of course, nothing stays perfect for long, especially not in a place ruled by someone like Karen. That afternoon, I spotted her during one of her infamous patrols. She called them community compliance walks, but let's be real, they were power trips with a pedometer. She strolled down the street, her clipboard clutched tightly, eyes scanning like a hawk. When she reached my driveway, I saw her pause, just for a second, long enough for her lips to tighten. Then she scribbled something on her clipboard and moved on. I didn't think much of it. Maybe she was knotting a weed between my pavers or something equally ridiculous. Emily's car was perfectly legal, neatly parked, and not an eyesore by any means. It wasn't leaking oil. It didn't have expired tags. It was just there. But there was something in that glance, a flicker of disapproval, the kind you feel more than see. I brushed it off, told myself I was overthinking it. Karen had plenty of people to harass. Surely she wouldn't bother someone like me, someone who never made waves. That night, Emily and I made popcorn and watched a superhero movie. She fell asleep halfway through it, curled up on the couch with my dog, who'd already claimed her as part of the pack. I remember looking over at them and feeling this quiet kind of joy. Domestic, ordinary, safe. But the storm was already building. I just didn't see it yet. Not the horror movie kind. This was sharper, real, and soaked in panic. I bolted upright in bed, heart racing, thinking something terrible had happened. I rushed downstairs, half-dressed, and found Emily standing barefoot in the driveway, phone in one hand, mascara-streaked tears running down her face. She looked like someone had ripped the ground out from under her. "Uncle Mark, it's gone," she whispered. Her voice cracked. I looked around, confused. "What's gone?" She turned to face the empty driveway. And then it hit me. Her car, the Honda Civic, the spot where it had been parked, was bare, clean pavement and nothing else. I blinked like maybe I was still dreaming. "Wait, what the hell?" "It's gone," she repeated, this time louder, more frantic. I woke up and looked out the window, and it's just not there. I immediately thought it was stolen. My mind jumped to worst-case scenarios. Someone had come in the night, hot-wired it, and taken off. But this was Evergreen Lakes. Nobody stole cars here. Hell, we barely got door-to-door salesmen. Still, I called the non-emergency police line. As I gave the operator the vehicle description and address, she cut me off. "Sir, are you sure it wasn't towed?" That word landed like a punch to the gut. Towed, no warning, no notice, just gone. I hung up and called the local impound lot. After being transferred twice and wading through 8 minutes of elevator music, someone finally confirmed it. The vehicle had been towed from my address just before 3 a.m. "Why?" "Request from HOA," the clerk mumbled. "Says it was unauthorized, not registered." I was stunned, furious. I stormed back inside, grabbed my phone, and sent an email to the HOA demanding an explanation. But I didn't wait for a reply. I knew exactly where Karen would be that morning, Sunday brunch patrol. Sure enough, I spotted her 2 blocks over, walking her dog like nothing had happened. Clipboard in hand, smug little smirk on her face. I marched up to her, heart pounding. "Karen." She turned like she'd been expecting me. "Good morning, Mark. My niece's car was towed last night, without warning, without notice." Her expression didn't change. If anything, she looked mildly amused. "Yes, I authorized that." "You what?" It was an unregistered vehicle, parked overnight in violation of section of the Evergreen Lakes Vehicle Guidelines. I stared at her, stunned. "You didn't even leave a notice. You didn't warn me." She flipped through her clipboard like this was all routine. "We're not required to, Mr. Halston. Unauthorized vehicles are subject to immediate removal." "Immediate?" I spat. "It's a 17-year-old's car parked in my driveway. It wasn't blocking anything. It wasn't a junker." Karen didn't flinch. "It's about maintaining standards. If we let one car slide, then everyone thinks the rules don't matter." "Did you even try to reach me?" "I don't have to. It's in the bylaws, page 73. She said it like that settled everything. I took a breath, trying not to explode. "This is outrageous. You just cost my niece $400 in towing and impound fees." Karen shrugged. "Maybe next time you'll remember to register guest vehicles. It's all in the handbook." And just like that, she walked away, calm, unbothered, smug. I stood there, stunned, fists clenched. Emily, who had come out behind me, watched the whole thing in silence. Her face was pale, angry, hurt. We spent the next few hours driving out to the impound lot, over an hour away in the next county. They made us wait in a sweaty lobby behind a bulletproof window while some guy shuffled paperwork like he was trying to set a world record for slowness. By the time we got the car back, it had a ding on the bumper and grease smudges on the door. Emily didn't say much on the ride home, but I could see it on her face, the embarrassment, the guilt, the heartbreak. She kept mumbling that she was sorry, like this had been her fault. It was. This was Karen's doing, her power trip, her need to flex control in the pettiest way possible. And that's when something shifted in me. I'd spent years ignoring the little things, the nitpicks, the arbitrary warnings, the neighbor who got fined for a cracked flower pot, the one who had to repaint her shutters because they weren't earth tone enough. I told myself none of it affected me. But now it did. This wasn't just about a towed car. This was about abuse, control, humiliation. Karen had made it personal. And now so would I. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Karen's smug face. The way she waved that clipboard around like it was a badge, the dismissive tone in her voice when she said page 73, like it gave her divine right to disrupt people's lives. My niece's car wasn't a clunker. It wasn't blocking traffic. It wasn't abandoned on the street. It was parked neatly in my asterisk driveway. And yet, she had it towed like it was some kind of garbage that didn't belong in her perfect little kingdom. No warning, no knock on my door, no note, just gone. So I started digging. I pulled out my HOA welcome packet, the thick brick of papers I'd stuffed in the bottom drawer years ago and never thought I'd need again. The official rules and regulations of Evergreen Lakes. 86 pages of small print, passive-aggressive phrasing, and vague legalese. I sat at the kitchen table until dawn with a highlighter and notebook, looking for the rule Karen had quoted. Section 14C. It was there, all right, titled Guest and Non-Resident Parking Guidelines. But the language wasn't as black and white as she made it sound. It said that vehicles not registered with the HOA may be subject to removal if they are deemed to be abandoned, inoperable, or in violation of aesthetic standards. It also stated that reasonable efforts should be made to contact the resident prior to any enforcement action. Should, not must. Classic loophole language. But the more I read, the more I noticed something else, ambiguity. It was everywhere. Vague terms like aesthetic disruption, non-compliant visual presence, and community cohesion standards. It was like a lawyer and a Stepford wife had collaborated on this monstrosity. No real definitions, just a buffet of subjective interpretations. Exactly the kind of document someone like Karen could weaponize. And clearly she had. So I started asking around. First, I went next door to the Jacksons. Sweet older couple, retired. They'd been here nearly 20 years. When I brought up Karen, Mr. Jackson's mouth twisted into a tight frown. She fined us $200 last spring, he said. Said our front door was the wrong shade of blue. I blinked, the asterisk door. Mrs. Jackson nodded solemnly. It matched the paint chip, but she said it looked too bright in direct sunlight. Said it didn't align with the neighborhood tone. We repainted it beige, still got a fine. I thanked them and kept going, house by house, neighbor by neighbor. And every story was worse than the last. One woman got written up for having too many potted plants on her porch, 5, to be exact. A father of 3 was fined because his kids left sidewalk chalk drawings in front of the house. Another couple had their backyard swing set cited for being non-conforming outdoor furniture. But the pattern that really caught my attention. The toes. 3 other neighbors, quiet, law-abiding people, told me about cars that had been towed over the past year. One was a college kid visiting home for spring break. Another was a woman whose mother came to stay during knee surgery recovery. All of them had one thing in common. They hadn't registered the vehicle with the HOA. And Karen had made sure they paid the price. Yet when I asked about cars parked by asterisk her friends, like the sleek black SUV that often sat outside House 14 for days at a time, no one remembered seeing those towed. In fact, there were stories of Karen waving off violations for board members or preferred residents. It was all just too convenient. That's when the anger in me cooled into something sharper, focused. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was building a case. I created a spreadsheet, logged every story. Date, time, rules cited, action taken, outcome. I took photos of her friends' cars, of her own vehicle parked on the curb in clear violation of the no street parking overnight policy. I requested a full list of recent HOA fines and infractions under the community's disclosure rules. It took some back and forth, but eventually I got it. And it painted a damning picture. 73 fines in the last 9 months. Of those, over 80% were issued to the same 8 households. Karen's critics, her non-favorites, people who'd spoken out in past meetings, or worse, people who didn't kiss the ring. And tucked into the notes on several of the vehicle citations, the phrase unauthorized vehicle, same wording as Emily's. This wasn't about keeping up appearances. This was targeted harassment. But here, where things took an unexpected turn. One of the neighbors I spoke to, a quiet guy named Dennis, looked over my spreadsheet and raised an eyebrow. "Wait, your niece's last name is Halston." I nodded. "Yeah, she's my sister's daughter. Why?" Dennis let out a low whistle. "You're kidding. That's asterisk her asterisk name." "Whose?" He leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper. "Mayor Halston, the mayor of this city." My stomach dropped. I'd forgotten. Emily's grandfather, my sister's father-in-law, was the asterisk Mayor Thomas Halston. Quiet, fair, and famously allergic to corruption. The kind of guy who still held the door open for people and remembered the names of city workers' dogs. Emily never brought it up, never bragged. She didn't like the attention. But now it mattered. Because Karen hadn't just targeted some random guest. She'd messed with the asterisk mayor's granddaughter. And she had no idea. When I told Emily what I'd found, how this wasn't just a one-time mistake but part of a clear pattern of abuse, she didn't look surprised. She just looked tired. She sat at the kitchen table, stirring a mug of cocoa that had gone cold, and listened as I laid everything out. "I didn't want to say anything," she said quietly, "because I didn't want him to step in. Grandpa gets enough pressure from every direction. I didn't want to be another problem." I looked at her for a long moment. "Emily, you asterisk are his family, and this is more than a neighborhood dispute. Karen is abusing her power, and she's doing it under the radar. What she did to you, she's done to other people, too. This isn't just about your car anymore. It's about everyone she's steamrolled." She took a breath, then slowly she reached for her phone. "I'll call him." She didn't do it dramatically. There was no demand or anger in her voice, just calm resolve. The call was short. She told him what happened, just the basics, and asked if he'd be willing to look into something. No names, no threats, no demands, just a granddaughter asking her grandfather to listen. Mayor Thomas Halston wasn't the kind of man who rushed to judgment. He didn't make headlines for bold speeches or grandstanding, but he believed in accountability. And he took quiet abuses of authority very seriously, especially when they targeted someone he loved. Later that night, I got a call from a restricted number. "Mr. Halston," a calm, measured voice said, "I understand you've been keeping some records. I'd like to take a look." We met the next afternoon at a local cafe, low-key unassuming. He came alone, no security detail, dressed like someone's retired uncle, not the highest official in the city. I handed him a thick folder with everything I'd compiled. The spreadsheets, the annotated rules, the documented inconsistencies. I even included a list of names, neighbors willing to speak, stories ready to be told. He read through it carefully. No outbursts, no visible anger. But as he flipped from page to page, his jaw tightened ever so slightly. "She's been getting away with this for a while," I said. "She has," he replied, "but not anymore." He didn't want to make a big splash, yet. Instead, he assured me he'd begin a quiet inquiry, starting with the city attorney's office. HOA governance was often left to internal boards, but when things tipped into fraud, discrimination, or targeted abuse, that became a municipal concern. In the meantime, he asked me to keep Karen talking. So I did. I played the part of the concerned but confused resident. I sent polite emails requesting the exact bylaw that justified Emily's tow. I asked for minutes from the HOA meetings where these policies were voted on. I requested the list of approved and disapproved guest vehicle types, which, of course, didn't exist. And every time, Karen responded with thinly veiled contempt. "I suggest you reread the rules before continuing to challenge our procedures. Please remember, Mr. Halston, that the HOA board operates with full authority granted by the bylaws. It is not our job to educate you on community standards." But my favorite: repeated inquiries without merit may be considered harassment under Section 22B. She was getting nervous, defensive, sloppy. So I started recording every phone call, every in-person conversation, every time she answered a question with a contradiction. One week, she told me there was asterisk a specific list of vehicle restrictions. The next, she said it was subjective discretion. She claimed she always issued warnings before towing, then admitted in a board email that immediate action was taken in several cases due to visual concerns. She was unraveling and didn't even know she was being watched. Because while I was baiting her, Mayor Halston was pulling threads of his own. Turns out, Karen had submitted multiple incident reports to justify past tows, each one full of vague language and, in several cases, outright falsehoods. She listed cars as abandoned that had been parked for less than 8 hours, marked inoperable vehicles that were driven daily, described non-compliant appearances based on nothing more than personal taste. Worse, some of those cars belonged to residents of color, families who'd moved into Evergreen Lakes in the last 2 years. Now it wasn't just a question of overreach, it was a question of discrimination. And with that, the mayor was no longer just curious. He was furious. Quietly controlled, but furious. He told me to be ready, that there would come a moment when Karen would push one step too far, and when she did, we'd be ready to catch her in the act. So we set the trap. We planned every detail. All we needed was one more car. We chose a Tuesday, quiet, uneventful routine, the kind of day Karen wouldn't suspect a thing. Emily's friend Lena had just gotten her license and agreed to help us. She drove an older Toyota Corolla, clean, boring, practically invisible. We parked it in my driveway, right where Emily's car had been the night it was towed. This time, though, we did everything by the book. We filed a guest vehicle registration form, submitted it via the HOA's official email address, and hand-delivered a printed copy to the office mailbox, complete with time-stamped photos. And then we waited. But we weren't just sitting around hopping. Karen would take the bait. We had cameras, 2 doorbell cams, a GoPro hidden in a nearby bush with a direct line of sight to the driveway, and a city employee, a code enforcement officer handpicked by the mayor, sitting in an unmarked car across the street, sipping coffee and watching everything unfold. By 2:00 p.m., Karen was on her usual patrol. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched high on her nose, walking that smug little gait like she was inspecting troops. I watched from behind my blinds as she reached my house and paused. She tilted her head at the Toyota, lips pursing. Then she scribbled something. I saw it that moment when her eyes narrowed. She wasn't looking at an unregistered car. She was looking at a challenge. A direct challenge to her authority. An hour later, I received an email. Subject line, vehicle noncompliance notification. It claimed the Toyota was unregistered, improperly parked, and not visually consistent with the community standard. She gave no photos, no evidence, and completely ignored the registration forms we'd submitted. She gave us *1 hour to remove it, or further action will be taken. We didn't move it. 45 minutes later, the tow truck rolled in. I stepped out onto the porch just as Karen marched up the walkway like she owned the pavement. "I gave you notice, Mr. Halston," she barked, pointing at the car like it was a biohazard. "And I gave you documentation," I said calmly, holding up the guest registration form with a date and time stamp. "This car is properly registered. You received it, the board received it, and I have the delivery confirmation." She didn't blink. The board has the discretion to override registrations if a vehicle is deemed disruptive. "Disruptive how?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "It lacks visual conformity." That was it, her big justification. Visual conformity. The tow driver hesitated. "You sure this one's okay to haul? It doesn't look like it's violating anything." Karen whipped around, face flushed. "I authorized it, do your job." And then from the car across the street, the code enforcement officer stepped out. Slowly, calmly, badge visible, clipboard in hand. "Ma'am," he said, addressing Karen, "can I ask you a few questions about this action you're taking?" Karen froze. "Who are you?" "City Code Enforcement. Just observing today, ma'am. We've had a few complaints about inconsistent HOA practices, and I'm conducting an informal audit." I'll never forget the color draining from her face. The officer walked up to me and asked if I had documentation. I handed over everything: registration, time-stamped photos, emails, video footage. He reviewed it all, nodding. Then he turned to Karen. "According to this, the vehicle is in compliance. Do you have documentation to prove otherwise?" Karen stammered. I don't need to provide proof. I am the president of the HOA." "But your authority," the officer said carefully, "doesn't override due process. If this vehicle is towed without a valid infraction, it could constitute wrongful action under municipal code." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. And just when I thought she might back down, she snapped. "This is harassment," she shouted. "You're all ganging up on me. You have no idea the pressure I'm under to keep this neighborhood in order." Neighbors started peeking out from their windows and doorways. Some stepped outside. Phones appeared. Cameras clicked on. Karen turned to the tow driver, practically spitting. "Hook it up, now." He hesitated. "I'm not touching that car without a green light from the city, lady." And then sirens. 2 patrol cars rolled in, not rushing, just purposeful. One of the officers stepped out and greeted the code enforcement officer with a nod. "Everything all right here?" Karen spun around, face wild. "Yes, no, this man is interfering with HOA business." The officer looked at the documents in the code enforcement officer's hand, then at me, then at Karen. "Ma'am, we've been informed by the city that there is now an asterisk active investigation into your conduct." Karen's jaw dropped. "What?" "We'll need you to refrain from any further enforcement actions until the matter is resolved." "Resolved? I am the enforcement authority." "Not anymore," came a quiet voice from the sidewalk. Everyone turned. It was Mayor Halston. He wasn't wearing a suit, just jeans and a collared shirt. But the moment he stepped forward, the entire tone shifted. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, calm as a whisper, "you've made a mockery of your position. You've targeted residents, falsified violations, and cost families money they didn't owe. That ends now." Karen's face crumbled. "I was protecting this neighborhood." "You were protecting your ego." The mayor turned to the officer. "Please make a formal record of this incident and ensure that vehicle stays exactly where it is." The tow truck slowly reversed and pulled away. Karen stood alone in the driveway, surrounded, exposed. Powerless. She opened her mouth, but no one was listening anymore. And for the first time since I'd moved to Evergreen Lakes, she didn't have the final word. The fallout wasn't just swift, it was seismic. By sunrise the next morning, the story had leaked to the local news. I don't know who tipped them off. Maybe one of the neighbors, maybe someone in the mayor's office. But within hours, the HOA drama that had once been whispered behind hedges was splashed across Channel 7 under the headline, "HOA President Under Fire for Abusive Towing Practices." Karen's photo, taken mid-scream in my driveway, was all over social media. It wasn't flattering. Her hair was windblown, her expression twisted with rage. Someone captioned it, "When HOA power trips go wrong." It went viral. By noon, reporters were parked on the corner of our quiet little cul-de-sac. A news van rolled by every other hour. One of the neighbors set up a lawn chair and started live streaming the whole circus. Karen, once the queen of Evergreen Lakes, had vanished. Her car was gone. No morning patrols, no clipboard, no pastel cardigans marching down the sidewalks. Then came the official announcement. Mayor Halston stood behind a podium outside City Hall, flanked by the city attorney and the director of municipal code enforcement. The press conference was short, but the words hit like thunder. "The city is opening a formal inquiry into Evergreen Lakes Homeowners Association following multiple credible reports of misconduct, selective enforcement of bylaws, and potential financial misappropriation." Karen Mitchell had been suspended as HOA president pending the investigation. The phrase he used, "gross abuse of authority." I watched it all unfold with a strange mix of satisfaction and disbelief. I'd started this with nothing more than a towed car and a pit in my stomach. Now, Karen's empire was crumbling. The shockwave hit the neighborhood hard. Residents who had once kept their heads down were suddenly emboldened. People I barely knew stopped me in the street to say thank you. A neighbor 2 houses over handed me a USB drive and said, "You might want this. It's footage of her yelling at my kids for riding scooters too close to her sidewalk." Emails flooded the HOA inbox. Letters of complaint. Demands for reform. Someone even printed a stack of flyers that read asterisk, "It's OUR neighborhood, not hers." But the real nail in the coffin came from inside the HOA itself. The treasurer, Mrs. Caldwell, a retired accountant with a spine of steel and a moral compass that never wavered, requested a third-party audit of HOA finances. She'd never liked Karen, but hadn't had the leverage to challenge her. Now, with public scrutiny bearing down and a city investigation underway, she made her move. And what that audit uncovered, it was the final twist of the knife. Karen had been siphoning HOA funds for years under the vague line item, administrative expenses. Tens of thousands of dollars paid to shell companies for consulting, receipts that didn't match, invoices for services never rendered. One of the companies she paid, monthly, was a landscaping firm that didn't even exist anymore. It had shut down 2 years prior. The board turned on her overnight. A special emergency meeting was called. Residents packed the community clubhouse, standing room only. You could feel the tension in the air like electricity before a storm. I sat near the back, not planning to speak, just to listen. But when they opened the floor for comments, someone asked, "Who started all this?" A few heads turned toward me. And someone said it out loud. Mark did. Applause broke out. Karen's defenders, few as they were, didn't make a sound. Then Mrs. Caldwell stood, and in a voice that trembled only slightly made the motion. We move to initiate a full recall vote to permanently remove Karen Mitchell from the board. The motion passed unanimously. And just like that, the woman who ruled this neighborhood like a dictator was done. A week later, the city issued a full report. Findings included improper towing without just cause, failure to follow due process in issuing fines, targeted enforcement with discriminatory implications, financial misappropriation of HOA dues. Karen was officially charged with misdemeanor fraud and cited for multiple civil violations. She lawyered up, of course, but her name was now synonymous with everything rotten about HOA overreach. At a community meeting the following weekend, Mayor Halston stood beside Emily and offered a public apology, not just as the mayor, but as her grandfather. "I'm proud of my granddaughter for keeping her head high through all of this," he said, "and I'm proud of this community for standing up for what's right." Emily blushed but smiled. She didn't say much, just thanked everyone quietly and hugged me hard afterward. The girl who once whispered apologies for causing trouble was now the spark that ignited real change. And Karen. She moved out 3 weeks later. No goodbye, no explanation. Just packed up and left under the cover of dusk, her house listed the next morning through a cash-buy listing agency. She couldn't even sell it the normal way. She just wanted out. And nobody, not a single soul, missed her. Before, it had that tight, artificial hush, the kind that blanketed our neighborhood under Karen's regime. Everything looked pristine but felt tense. Conversations were polite but shallow, eyes always darting to see if someone was watching, listening, reporting. Now it was real, peaceful. You could actually hear kids laughing again. The first change came with the election. The recall vote passed in a landslide. Over 90% of residents voted to remove Karen permanently from the board. And in her place, we chose someone who had never run for anything in her life, Melissa Cortez, a single mom from down the street. She wasn't polished. She didn't wear pastel sweater sets or wield a clipboard like a sword. She wore sneakers, cracked jokes, and actually listened when people talked. Melissa's first act as HOA president, she held a *real* town hall, Not in the sterile community center with folding chairs and rules about speaking time, but in her own backyard. She brought cookies, asked for feedback, took notes by hand, and then she got to work. Policies were revised. The towing rule gone. In its place, a clear, humane process. 3 written notices, 48-hour warning minimum, and photographic evidence required before any enforcement. Guest registrations were simplified to a single online form, and every fine issued now had to be reviewed by at least 2 board members, not just the president. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it felt human asterisk. The petty tyranny that once choked our neighborhood had been replaced by something I'd almost forgotten existed in places like this. Asterisk community asterisk. Neighbors started coming out of their houses again. People smiled more, helped each other carry groceries. A group of kids chalked a hopscotch path down the sidewalk one afternoon, and instead of a citation, Melissa walked by and joined in, heels and all. And me. I felt lighter. It's funny, when I bought this house, all I wanted was peace and quiet. I didn't want to get involved, didn't want to rock the boat. But it took losing a little peace to realize just how fragile it really was under the surface. And Emily. She stayed an extra week past her planned visit. Said she wasn't ready to leave just yet. We sat on the porch one night, sipping lemonade, watching the sun dip behind the rooftops. "This place feels different," she said. "Yeah," I nodded. "It does." She gave me that sideways smile, the one that always reminded me so much of her mom. Grandpa said I should come intern at City Hall next summer. I raised an eyebrow, going into politics now. She laughed. "No, I just want to learn how to fix broken things before they break other people." I didn't say anything to that. I just smiled. Because she already had. The night before she left, the neighborhood threw a block party, the kind we hadn't had in years. Tables filled the street, lights strung from trees, kids darting between folding chairs. The Jacksons brought their famous potato salad. The Patel family set up a karaoke machine. Someone even brought a piñata shaped like a clipboard. Nobody had to say who it was modeled after. And as the music played and laughter echoed down the street, I looked around and realized something. We didn't just get rid of Karen. We reclaimed our neighborhood. Not with screaming matches or lawsuits or fights, but with truth, with unity, with one quiet, relentless push against someone who thought no one would ever challenge her. All because of a towed car. Petty tyranny had pulled the wrong thread. And when the fabric unraveled, we saw what had been hiding underneath. Good people, good intentions, and a community worth fighting for. So yeah, I still park cars in my driveway, and now nobody bats an eye. The rules are still there, but they make sense. They're fair. They're not weapons anymore. Sometimes I think about Karen, where she ended up, whether she learned anything. But then I remind myself it doesn't matter. This story wasn't about her. It was about asterisk us asterisk. And karma. Well, sometimes it pulls up in a tow truck.